My wife abandoned Maine and left behind a letter explaining why I spent years unsuccessfully trying to track her down, but now she's back, begging to reconcile. Before my wife left, she had been acting strangely for months. She was working overtime a lot and always on her phone. Then, seemingly out of the blue, I came home from work one day to find our house completely empty. My wife, our child, and all their stuff were gone, along with our emergency cash. That's when I saw the note she left. In it, she said she was taking our child and leaving me for someone who made her happier, someone I knew. She wouldn't disclose who it was. After reading the letter, I broke down. The pain I felt that first night was indescribable. I drank a lot. It felt like she had stabbed me in the heart. I read the letter over and over, always asking myself one question: who was this person that I knew? Why would she tell me it was someone I knew without naming them, just to drive me insane? I started looking closer into my circle to see who the person could be. She was always close to my old friend Nick, because we all went to high school together. I had Nick over a few times, and they would reminisce about their science projects in simpler times. But I was almost sure there was no relationship there. Then, I thought about my coworker Trey. She always talked highly of him, complimenting how sweet he was and how nice his car was, but she never seemed interested in him. I spent weeks cycling through potential partners. The thought of her loving someone else, someone I knew, was driving me mad. I drank a lot and couldn't bear the thought of another man getting the same love and happiness I had from our relationship. And she took my child too. A lot of thoughts raced through my head. I retraced my steps over our 6 years of marriage, trying to figure out what went wrong and who could be satisfying her in ways I couldn't. Months went by. I considered divorce or reporting to the police that my child had been wrongfully taken, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I had no motivation. I spent hours in bed, and the house became filthy. Everyone around me felt like a suspect. I hadn't gone anywhere for weeks except work and home. Every time I tried to sleep, I saw my wife, Emily, in my dreams, laughing with this mystery man while my child called him Dad and enjoyed the family I created. I checked all her social media accounts, but there were no changes, no new posts or followers. I called all her coworkers and her job daily, but they always said they hadn't seen her. I emailed and called her from different numbers, but had no luck contacting her. My last resort was public court records, hoping to find something about a change in property under her name. I found nothing. By this point, I had lost my family, friends, and will to live. I even considered hiring a private investigator, but saw no point. That's when I decided to call my brother Isaac. I didn't know what to expect from that conversation, but I realized I wanted to live, otherwise I wouldn't have called him. We ended the call agreeing that I should see a therapist. The next morning, I tried to follow my usual routine and called some therapists in the area. I finally found one specializing in family-induced trauma. Her name was Mrs. Smith. I spent 2 years seeing Mrs. Smith, coming to terms with navigating life without my wife or child. The pain and insecurity were replaced with rage and resentment for Emily. I usually dealt with this frustration by going to the gym 7 times a week. I also changed my diet and began cooking more. These changes, along with therapy, helped my mental and physical health. I became really fit, felt good, and looked even better. Things started to look up. That was until I stumbled across a letter in a pile of junk mail. It was from Emily. I rushed inside, eager to see what she had to say. The audacity she had. I felt a range of emotions, anxiety to find out the truth and resentment for her decision. In the letter, she said leaving me was the biggest regret of her life. Her partner had been abusing her, and she regretted leaving me. She told me I was the true love of her life, and no man could ever compare. At the end of the letter, she asked to talk in person and begged for my forgiveness. I couldn't believe it. Not once in the letter did she tell me where my child was or if they were okay. I considered driving to the return address to see them, but if I wanted to see my child again, I knew I had to be careful. Instead, I sent a return letter agreeing to meet at a local coffee shop. We met later that month. Emily showed up looking as seductive as ever, trying to remind me of everything we had. She wore makeup that made her eyes sparkle and shoes I always told her were my favorite. We began talking, and she asked how I was doing and what I had been up to. I told her I had been going to therapy to heal from the parts of me she broke. She apologized and said she wanted her family back. She told me the man she left me for was cheating on her and it was taking a toll on her mental health. The main thing haunting me was the thought of my child growing up without me. I asked her who it was, and she revealed it was my brother Isaac. My blood boiled. This was the person who talked me out of taking my own life. the closest person to me. Emily and Isaac. Before I let anger take control, I snapped back to reality at the thought of my child. I let her finish and asked where our child was. She said I could see him and would bring him to the house. I told her that wouldn't be necessary because I didn't want her near my house. I dropped the bomb on her that I wouldn't get back together and wanted to share custody. She began raging in the coffee shop. She knocked over my coffee and told me I wasn't being considerate of our family, throwing away everything we had. I told her my only priority was to see my child, and she blew her chance to fix our relationship the moment she left. She screamed, loud enough for the entire shop to hear, that I wasn't the father and I was chasing a dream that could never come true. She said the real father was Isaac, which explained the dark hair and blue eyes. She called me less of a man and said she only wanted to come back because I had more money and put up less of a fuss. I became heated. The rage and resentment I thought were suppressed built up inside me and all I could see was red. She never loved me. She had always been interested in my brother. I lost a wife, a child, and a brother all in one day. The scab I thought was healing was ripped off. We got into a huge altercation. I don't remember much from it, but as I tried to leave, I was hit in the back of the head with something heavy. I woke up in the hospital. The doctor told me I was hit with a coffee pot, and they had to remove shards from my head. Update: a few days later I was finally released from the hospital, and they called a taxi for me. As I waited, all I could think about was losing my family all over again. Not only had my wife left me for my brother, but the child I raised wasn't mine. I felt betrayed and alone. When the taxi arrived, I asked to be taken to the nearest bar. At the bar, I was on my fourth drink, and the feelings I was running from only intensified. I stood up after hours there, and the last drink hit me like a truck. My head was swimming, the room spinning. I stumbled outside, unable to make it to the bus stop. I felt weak and blacked out, landing on the sidewalk. I didn't wake up until the next morning. My head still spun and my wound throbbed. I looked around and someone asked what I was doing there. I was in too much pain to speak and laid there motionless. A few minutes later, a random guy asked if I was looking for a zip. I didn't know what he meant until he pulled out a powdery substance. I'd never done drugs before, but I wanted anything to take away the pain. I had nothing to lose. I reached for my wallet, but it was gone. Someone must have taken it while I was passed out. I asked him to help me out this one time, and he gave me the drug. He asked for something in return, and the only thing I had was my phone. There wasn't much use for it anymore. Anyway, the feeling I got from using the drug sent me to the moon. I felt on top of the world, and the thoughts of Emily and the child were still in my mind, but I didn't care anymore. I finally felt happy. I rode this wave until it wore off. Coming down was the hard part. After a few hours, the pain and sadness set in again. I needed to feel that way again. I got a taxi home, grabbed a debit card, and withdrew $500. I went back to the bar, meeting the dealer. This became a routine. I had plenty of savings, so things were okay financially despite my habits. But after losing my job from too many call-outs and still having a mortgage, my savings began to dwindle. I made a bad decision. I sold the house and moved to an apartment. Before I knew it, I had lost everything. All my belongings were sold or lost because I couldn't make payments. I began living on the streets near the bar. I needed something stronger and cheaper. Mike introduced me to 2 new substances, dope and meth. One particularly bad night I felt nauseous. I couldn't stop vomiting and it felt like an elephant was on my chest. Each breath was a struggle, my heart pounded, and the world spun. I tried to ask for help, but no words came out. Everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital bed with my mother by my side. Somehow she was informed that her son was on the brink of death. Long story short, she demanded I go to rehab. So here I am, trying to salvage what's left of my pathetic life.